Democratic Primary Candidates Forum featuring Jim Hill and Pete Sorenson, Democratic candidates for governor, and again, Governor Ted Kulongoski declined to participate. I'd like to introduce today's moderator, Liz Kaufman. Liz is a veteran of 20 years of campaigning and grassroots organizing with extensive experience in ballot measure campaigns. She has won 20 local and statewide funding measure campaigns. She has also worked with dozens of candidates for office, particularly at the local and legislative levels. Liz is a former high school teacher and is currently working with the Idaho Education Association as it organizes to place a statewide school funding measure on the November ballot. She co-authored the book Women for a Change, a grassroots guide to activism and politics with Thalia Zapatos. Liz?
Thank you. The other day I was talking to one of my Republican friends. Yes, I have a few. And although she's looking across at life as an independent a lot more. And I explained, you know, I don't know how you guys think you can win for governor. Look at your candidates. You got Kevin Mannix, who's 0-for-3 in statewide races. You've got Ron Saxton, who used to be a moderate, but seems to have drunk some Kool-Aid and is now running as the guy against immigrants. And you got Jason Atkinson, who I'm not even sure is old enough to vote. And she says, oh yeah? Look at what just happened at the teachers' convention last weekend, one of your strongest Democratic constituencies. They passed on endorsing an incumbent governor. When does that happen? They didn't endorse the former state treasurer, who they did endorse 4 years ago. The guy they came closest to endorsing was a random commissioner from Lane County. But in the end, they endorsed nobody, which pretty much means we're not sure about any of them. So if the teachers are any indication, your guys can't win either. Today we have with us two fine Democratic candidates who have a chance to prove my Republican friend wrong and to convince us that they're the best guy for the job. And in fact, among political operatives, we know there's more undecideds in this race than there are stars in the Central Oregon sky, and I am one of them. So let's get on with the festivities. This is a candidates forum as opposed to your typical debate, and we'll have a few sections. First, each candidate will give a 5-minute opening statement. A coin toss determined the order of the appearance. Our timekeeper today is the handy Chris Smith, who has an indicator for both 1 minute and 30 seconds to give you a sense of when you're running out of time, and I think he might even have 15 seconds on the side. Following opening statements, candidates will respond to questions suggested in advance by City Club members, and a subcommittee of the City Club Program Committee compose the final set of questions. We'll rely on the judgment of our distinguished panel of City Club members, seated on the side, to decide whether or not the questions have been answered by the candidates. If two or more, in other words, two or all three of you, raise your cards indicating they feel a question's not been answered, I'll restate the question and ask the candidates to reply again. On our panel, we have Susan Stone, Peter Wendell, and Mike Burton. Following prepared questions, City Club members will have an opportunity to ask questions from the floor at the microphones. Following the questions from the floor, each candidate will make a 3-minute closing statement. Please be respectful of the candidates, and we ask that you hold all applause until the end of the program. So let's meet our contestants. Jim Hill received a degree in economics from Michigan State University. I'm a Wolverine. An MBA from Indiana University, and his law degree from Indiana University College of Law. He's worked in both the Oregon Department of Justice and Oregon Department of Revenue prior to serving for 10 years as a state legislator. Most recently, Mr. Hill was twice elected to the position of Oregon State Treasurer. He currently serves on the boards of the Northwest Health Foundation, NARAL Pro-Choice America, and the Public Commission on the Legislature. Pete Sorenson. Pete received his undergraduate and master's degree from the University of Oregon. He worked for 5 years in Washington as legislative assistant to Congressman Jim Weaver before returning to Oregon to study and practice law, and eventually received Oregon Natural Resources Council's Award for Vision. In 1993, Mr. Sorenson was appointed to the state Senate and elected the following year, later taking on role of assistant minority leader. For the past 8 years, Mr. Sorenson has served as Lane County Commissioner. As you know, Governor Kulongoski was invited to participate in this forum but declined to attend. So why don't we have the candidates come on up? Now, First, we'll hear our candidates' opening statements. Mr. Hill, will you please begin?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to thank the City Club and the members for having us here today to share our views. Some are asking, where's Ted? Not just a question for this day and this event. That's a question that demonstrators holding signs were asking on the steps of the Capitol during the last legislative session when he refused to address issues that were important to them and to our state. The real question, though, is where has he been for the last 4 years? Only in the last year of his 4-year term, an election year, has he set forth plans to address the most serious problems facing our state. He won't even say the words, our schools are in crisis. We have the second largest class sizes in our elementary schools in the nation, and we're 4th overall. In his State of the State address right here in Portland, he didn't even mention the crisis that is facing the largest school district in the state. And there are solutions. For a start, the simple fact is that corporations are not paying their fair share of the tax burden for our schools. In the 70s, corporations paid 18% of the income tax burden, and now they pay 5%. They benefit from a well-educated workforce as much as anyone. And again, there are solutions to abolish the kicker, the corporate kicker, and raise the corporate minimum tax. And the long-term solution is that we must have a rainy day fund. We are only one of 2 states that does not have one. With regard to health care, 70,000 people have been dropped from the Oregon Health Plan during his administration. Now in an election year, he wants to raise the cigarette tax. That's not leadership. 4 years ago, when John Kitzhaber was still governor, Governor Kitzhaber wanted to raise the beer and wine tax and the cigarette tax to support the Oregon Health Plan. I supported Governor Kitzhaber. Ted Kulongoski did not. And again, there are solutions. First of all, there must be a prevention component in the Oregon Health Plan and health care in general. Yes, we should raise the beer and wine tax, and we should raise the cigarette tax, but also we should have an insurance review board that will make sure that increases in health care insurance rates is justified. Other states are doing this. We should be able to. With respect to jobs, yes, we are creating jobs, but we're creating jobs that are low-paying jobs with no benefits. I call them survival jobs. We must engage in international trade. We must improve our energy picture. We had an opportunity to purchase Portland General Electric. And let me say this, if you can get hold of your energy destiny, you can get hold of your economic destiny. We should engage in e-commerce in our state. Look at the research in our universities that have economic development with potential. As the Oregonian stated several weeks ago, our sister state of Washington is leaving us in the dust. We do not have to settle for mediocrity. We need a leader with leadership, good plans, and the courage and the ability to execute them. And that is why I'm running for governor, and that's why I ask for your support.
If you could please hold the applause till the end of the program, we'd appreciate it. Mr. Sorenson.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to come here today. I want to thank the City Club of Portland, especially for making this opportunity available. In a campaign of the length that I've run, I started in January of 2005, you have to have your family, your staff, and your volunteers, the hundreds of volunteers that help you do this. It can't be done by one person. So I want to thank all of those people that have made it possible for me to get to this point. But campaigns really are not about the candidates. They're about the people. And today I want to talk with you about respect. I want to talk with you about investment. And I want to talk with you about action. And on the topic of respect, the people in this city club are among the finest people in Oregon because you care to spend your time on civic affairs. And Mr. Hill and myself respect you. But speaking on my own behalf, when the governor of the state does not participate in the election process, he doesn't disrespect me or Mr. Hill. He disrespects the people of our state. And I wanted to thank you for letting me make these remarks today. You may know that I grew up in Coos County, went to public schools, went to community college, went to the University of Oregon. I got my bachelor's and master's in geography. Doug Marker followed me in getting a bachelor's degree in geography. I got my law degree. I worked for Congressman Weaver in Washington, D.C. I worked for the Secretary of Agriculture in the Carter administration. Came back to Oregon, practiced law, raised 2 wonderful children, got on the budget committee, on the board, chair of the board at Lane Community College. I was serving 2 terms. I did serve 2 terms in the Oregon State Senate. I was assistant minority leader. And for the last 9 years, I've been a Lane County Commissioner. The people of Oregon have invested in me. I would not be here today had there not been a public high school, a public community college, and a public university. I had to work hard, but it's foolish for me to think that I did this all alone. Other people invested in me. When our state is facing the degree of crisis that we're facing, $57 million cut on the biggest school district in the state, when we have the second highest number of children in a classroom of the 50 states, when 65,000 people have been thrown out of Oregon's 17 community colleges who are trying to improve themselves, and in healthcare, where we have 70,000 people thrown off the Oregon health plan since this governor took office. We have 600,000 people in Oregon without health insurance, 850,000 people, according to the Oregon Food Bank, eating out of an emergency food box. And we hear nothing but platitudes from this governor, nothing but platitudes, no leadership, no action, no accountability, no visibility. And I think it's time for solutions. You know, my daughter, in 2006, hopefully, she'll finish the U of O. 33 years behind her father. And she's worked part-time to work her way through Lane Community College and the University of Oregon. And last year on April 15th at 9:15 p.m., she called me up and said, Daddy, when I went to sign up for my job, I wanted all the taxes taken out, But now I have to pay the taxes, and I thought, first of all, First National Bank at Dad's going to have to cover that, $170. And then it occurred to me, 2/3 of the corporations in Oregon pay less taxes than my daughter working her way through college. That's the degree of unfairness I want to address. Those are the solutions I want to bring to invest in the people of our state. Thank you.
Thank you both. We'll now move to the portion of the program where I'll ask questions prepared in advance by City Club members. Each candidate will have 60 seconds to respond to the question. Following each answer, the other candidate has 30 seconds to respond. The candidates have not seen these questions in advance, although they may sound familiar. First question to Mr. Sorenson. You have proposed an ambitious agenda should you become next governor of Oregon. Where will the money come from to pay for funding for public education, health care, improved public safety, hunger eradication, and so forth?
The money will come from making our tax system fairer, and specifically, according to the Oregon Center for Public Policy, $1.8 billion has been shifted away from the major corporations doing business in Oregon. 33 years ago, those major corporations paid 18% of our income tax. This year they will pay 5% of our income tax. 2/3 of them pay no taxes. So the way you make the system fair is you invest in people, you move dollars that would be otherwise going out of state, and you invest those dollars in, among other things, public education, health care, and a rainy day fund. I believe that my leadership will provide an opportunity for the Democrats in the legislature and the few remaining moderates, Republicans, to help us make the investments we need to make. We don't want to be a third world country in Oregon. We need to make those investments. That's how I would get the money.
Thank you. Mr. Hill?
Just in addition to the things that Pete just mentioned, we also have to look at how government is managed. In the private sector, what people do is they align the interest of the company with the interest of the employees. In other words, provide incentives. If you can save, if you can give people incentives, employees an incentive to save funds, reward them, that is the way to squeeze the waste out of government, which is absolutely necessary.
Okay, question to Mr. Hill. You currently serve on a committee that will recommend reforms for how the legislature operates. What are your suggestions, and why do you believe they will improve the legislature?
Well, I don't want to presume what the other commissioners are going to do, but obviously one of the main things we're going to look at is to whether to go to annual sessions or not, annual legislative sessions or not. Also, one of the things that we will look at is maybe the timing of the legislature itself. Right now, the forecast comes out in May when the legislature is really about to wind down. Maybe moving the session to a later date to have it start would give the legislators more time to work on those issues. There's also the issues of pay. There's issues of campaign finance reform. One of the issues that we talked about is just how expensive races have become. When I ran the first time in 1980, I spent $16,000, primary and general. We've had a legislative race in this state where the candidates combined have spent over $1 million. That's too much money in politics.
Thank you. Mr. Sorenson?
I have two answers to that question. The first is that I wrote the Public Commission on the Legislature a letter, and I said, you know, what I think is odd is when I was elected to the Senate, 2 months after the election, we piled right into the Capitol and tried to solve the problems of the state. I think we need to have the study first and then have the Legislative Assembly meet, rather than have the legislators meet, fight, and then study for 18 months after they finish. Number two, I think it's urgent that we have campaign finance reform in Oregon.
Thank you. Next question for Mr. Sorensen. You've attacked the current governor for not raising more money for schools. But the governor did support 2 statewide revenue measures, and voters voted them down. What would you have done differently, and what would you do to generate more money for schools?
Well, number one, the voters have voted 3 times to cap their property taxes. They voted twice to reject personal income taxes, as you mentioned, and they voted innumerable times against a sales tax. I think what should be done, and what I will do as governor, is propose the tax reform that I'm asking. I'm asking that major corporations pay their fair share. Currently, 95% of all the income tax is paid by small business and wage earners. That's not fair. That's how I would get the money. And I fault this governor for failing to lead. If this governor had led, as an assistant Democratic leader of the Oregon Senate, would be running against him, no, I wouldn't be. But he didn't try. That's my opposition.
Thank you. Mr. Hill?
Yes, when it comes to funding our schools, I think that most Oregonians certainly favor our schools. But I think that there is a genuine question as to whether the money that goes to our schools is being spent well. What I would propose is that in the same way that we audit all of the state agencies, we should audit the money that goes to the schools to make sure that it is being spent in a way that gets into the classroom and has the effect of educating our students. We are battling for the hearts and minds of our voters, and
Thank you. Remember that thought. Mr. Hill, if the 2007 legislature is as divided as it's been in the last several years, even in the most ambitious agenda, the next governor may fail. If you are governor, what would you do to successfully move your agenda through a minefield that has blown many previous agendas to pieces?
Well, first of all, the governor has to be engaged with the legislature and the legislators. Governor Kulongoski was absent last session. There were jokes made about it. What the governor must do is engage the legislators, Republicans and Democrats. I would not prejudge the Republican leadership. What I would do is encourage communication. The governor has a tremendous asset in Mahonia Hall. That is a place where perhaps we can get legislators together in a less heated environment, invite them in to discuss issues, and also be willing to work with them, have a conciliatory attitude toward them. But I think most problems are problems of communication, where people assume that people think certain things when it is not true. Give them the opportunity to work together. The governor must be someone who is a consensus builder.
Thank you. Mr. Sorenson?
I think it's crucial that a governor be interactive with not only the public, not only the media, but the members of our 90-member Oregon Legislative Assembly. I think it's crucial that a governor use everything at his disposal to try to go out and meet people halfway. You know, good fences make good neighbors. And I'll tell you what, we need to make sure that a governor's out there mending those fences all the time and not hiding, not ignoring his responsibilities, not hiding from the realities, the harsh realities that these are difficult problems. But a governor that's fully engaged can really make a difference.
Thank you. Next question, Mr. Sorenson. In a period when we arguably need to unite the state, how does your campaign appeal to voters throughout Oregon, not just those in the Willamette Valley?
Well, I think I'm the only candidate running for governor that grew up outside of the Willamette Valley, but within the state of Oregon. I grew up in a little town not far from remote Oregon, so that's how remote it is in Coos County. So I think I have the background of being a guy that's worked in Washington, D.C., and been a senator and been a commissioner of a large county with a budget of $450 million a year. But I'll tell you what, it's really meeting people wherever they are. And our campaign's gone from North Portland to Nissa. It's gone from Baker to Burns. It's gone all over the state of Oregon, all up and down the Willamette Valley. I have never turned down a speaking opportunity anywhere in the state. I believe in openness, access. Our U.S. senators fly 6,000 miles round trip for a town hall meeting. This governor has never held one. I think access is very important to people, whether they are in an isolated community or in a more sophisticated community in the Willamette Valley. To me, I think it's crucial. Outreach is what we're talking about.
Thank you. Mr. Hill.
Yes, other than Governor Kulongoski, I am the only candidate in this race, Republican, Democrat, or Independent, who has actually been elected statewide. I've been elected statewide twice because I have gotten around this state, and I have gone around to all of the to see as many people as I can around this state. I've demonstrated electability, and if I was not serving the people as they should all around the state, I wouldn't have been elected twice to statewide office.
Thank you. The next question is a little longer, and it goes first to Mr. Hill. Because of tight environmental regulations, industry now accounts for a small percentage of the pollution to our state's air and water. According to DEQ, most pollution comes from everyday activities, including driving, runoff from farms and development, burning wood, and other sources that are difficult or impossible to regulate. What steps would you take to improve the environmental quality in our state?
Thank you. Well, again, getting back to the issue of energy, for example, we are a state that's well attuned to alternative forms of energy. That is one thing that we can do. The other thing that we can do is look at biodiesel, for example, clean, efficient. Also, what we have to do is concentrate on getting funds, whether it be through grants from the federal government or any other place where we can, to try to find ways to, for example, remove the pollution that is caused by the city of Portland when it rains and everything drains into the rivers. But what we must do is concentrate on alternative forms of energy that create jobs that are clean, and so that we are not dependent on things like oil that we have to get from people who hate us.
Thank you. Mr. Sorenson?
Governor Kulongoski proposed to roll back Oregon's 30-year turbidity rule. That's the rule that makes sure our rivers are clean in the state of Oregon. That's the kind of policy he pursues while claiming the platitudes of a clean environment. I think it's crucial that we invest in solar energy, wind energy, and other technologies so that we have family wage jobs, sustainable jobs, and build a sustainable economy for this state. We could be one of the leaders in the United States in alternative energy technology. I think we need to do it.
Okay, Mr. Sorenson. Given that many of the cost drivers for health care are determined on the national level, what can Oregon's governor and legislature actually do to reduce health care costs for Oregonians?
One thing I think is crucial is to pass a law, and I would work day and night to get a law passed that Representative Ackerman introduced in the last session that required the Oregon Insurance Commission be expanded to 3 members, business, labor, and insurance. And the purpose would be to approve or disapprove insurance rates in Oregon. That will bring some cost containment in these outrageous insurance rates that public and private employers are coping with. Secondly, I think it's crucial we invest in as much universal coverage as possible. There's 100,000 children in Oregon without insurance. We're leaving $100 million on the table. Back in Washington, D.C., we could match 2-to-1 to our state dollars and cover those 100,000 children. Again, the governor does nothing about that. And yet he supports a tax credit for yacht owners that costs the state of Oregon $26 million and says, at this very group, we had no choice last session. Well, we have choices. We need to make those choices, and I believe I'm the person to lead this state.
Mr. Hill.
Thank you. One of the things that we should do is find better and better ways to pool our resources when we purchase prescription drugs. But I'd also like to talk about the issue of prevention. That is really where you save money, is by catching it before people get sick. Every year we hear about the president took his physical and so forth and so on and what condition he's in. We really need to do that for everybody, because if we can catch these illnesses early, we can prevent people from suffering, and it costs less to address it.
Okay. Next question for Mr. Hill. You've entered this race because you think you can do a better job than the incumbent. In your view, where has he failed? What would you do differently? And how would you do it?
Well, what we've had, I think the issue really is one of leadership, one of ability to know what to do. But you have to face up to issues. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, the governor has waited until for 4 years to address issues that have been bothering the state even before he took office. You have to have a definite plan. You have to be able to execute it. And you have to have the courage to stand up to special interest when they try to thwart that plan. If I'm fortunate enough to be the next governor, I want to be the best governor that this state has ever had. And that is because of how I feel about this state. The purpose of government is to give people an opportunity for a better life. And what you have to do is get up. You have to plan, and you have to execute, and you have to have courage.
Okay, that's the signal that you have another shot at it. I'll reread the question for you. You have entered this race because you think you can do a better job than the incumbent. In your view, where has he failed? What would you do differently, and how would you do it?
Thank you again. Yes, then I guess we need to talk about specific issues. Well, let's talk about education. Both Pete and I have talked about specific solutions, which is doing away with the kicker, dedicating it to our schools, also raising the corporate minimum tax and getting a rainy day fund. The governor has not addressed any of these things. Time is precious. We're running out of time here. On the issue of health care, the Oregon Health Plan, again, the governor comes up with a solution that he avoided in the past. Now he comes up with it, and I think it's frankly because since I entered the campaign, I've been hitting him on these things. But again, what we have to do is raise the beer and wine tax, which, by the way, is the lowest in the nation, raise the cigarette tax, and also, again, look at, in terms of health care, doing something about prevention.
Thank you. Mr. Sorenson.
Do I have 30 seconds to respond to this?
We could give you 60 since he had 2 shots.
In my opinion, the governor's failed at 2 levels. One, he's failed to provide the vision and the commitment to where he wants to take the state. And secondly, he's failed to communicate in any reasonable way with the leadership, public, private, nonprofit, corporate, throughout the whole state. So he's failed in 2 major ways. And in my view, on the policy side, you've heard me talk about health care, education, and the other things, tax reform. But fundamentally, on the former point, we've got to make sure we have a governor who is willing to go out and talk about these difficult issues and educate people about the degree of the difficulty. 800,000 people without food, 600,000 people without health care, second highest number of children in a class. We've got to have real money, real investment in those children, or we're going to lose this generation. We're going to be unfair. We will not be proper stewards for the generation following us.
We have 2 questions. Sorry? They would like you to focus a little bit on what you would do differently. We'll give you 30 more seconds.
Town hall meetings. I would go out and have open office hours. When I worked in the Carter administration, the president would field phone calls from the public via radio. Why can't we have that in Oregon with our governor? Why can't we have more access so the governor will know the magnitude of the problems? That's what I would do different, policy and procedure.
Next question, thank you, goes to Mr. Sorenson. The public employee retirement system was an issue during the last campaign for governor and has received, a lot of public attention since then. You've been critical of Governor Kulongoski's handling of PERS. If you had been governor, what would you have done differently? And if you become governor, what, if anything, will you do to address it further?
If I had been governor, I would have read the legal opinion from Greg Chamoff, the lawyer for the Oregon legislature, who said that the bill that was passed by the Senate and House was unconstitutional and would never be allowed to go into effect. So number one, I would not have signed that legislation the way the governor did. I would have said, unfortunately, that legislation is unconstitutional. I take an oath of office to follow the Constitution. You cannot take away contract rights from thousands and thousands of people by virtue of legislative action. What we should do now that that legislation has partially been ruled constitutional and mostly been ruled unconstitutional, is let the dust settle on this for several years, because we now have in place the legislation that was part of the package, and it hasn't done the damage to the people that were, where there was intended damage. Those people have now been protected by the court. So I'd say, let's wait and see.
Mr. Hill?
Essentially, I would agree with Pete. There have been reforms. There has been another tier created in the PERS system, where as new employees come in, they will come in the less expensive tier. We have a situation also where we're going to have a lot of people my age who are going to be retiring, and hopefully that will take stress off of the system. But I say let the reforms that have been gained through the courts and through the law, give them time to work.
Okay, next question for Mr. Hill. You've said that as governor you will demand performance audits to make sure public schools are spending their money appropriately before you work to stabilize and improve school funding. Since many schools are facing serious budget shortfalls today, what is your plan for short-term help for schools that need it now?
Well, the short-term plan really is, again, to abolish the corporate kicker and also at this next legislative session to raise the corporate minimum tax. As I mentioned earlier, and this is not anti-business, I want to be very clear about that, but the fact is that in the 70s, the businesses, corporations paid 18% of the tax burden. Now they're paying 5% of the tax burden. And what that is doing is shifting the burden on to the rest of us. And the middle class in this state and in this country is stressed out. And what we have to do, again, is go, and now in terms of immediate money, that is what the corporate kicker and raising the corporate minimum taxes. But in the end, we have to have stable funding. We have to have a rainy day fund. We're one of 2 states in the whole nation that doesn't have one.
Thank you. Mr. Sorenson.
Well, on the topic of performance audits, I think it's pretty important that we do both, have the performance audits in all public institutions in Oregon to gain greater awareness of where savings can occur, efficiencies can occur. But I am not going to wait until we finish all that before we address the problems of children that are in classrooms where there are too many children. We need to invest money right now in health care and education. As I've said, my daughter, earning her way through college, pays more taxes than 2/3 of the corporations doing business in this state. It's not fair, and I'm not going to stand for that.
We would like you to take one more shot at that, please. We'll give you another 30 seconds.
What would you like? You asked about performance audits. I said I was for them.
What will you do about short-term money for schools that are facing shortfalls right now?
I think it's crucial that we repeal the corporate kicker. I wrote an op-ed in the Oregonian in 2001 urging that. I think it's crucial that we drive up the contribution by major corporations to the taxes system in Oregon. They currently pay 5%. I don't think that's fair. We could get a substantial amount of money, $1.8 billion according to the Oregon Center for Public Policy.
Thank you. Next question to Mr. Sorenson. Oregon's history of failed attempts to reform our tax structure is legendary. Does the state need a fundamentally reformed taxation structure? If so, why? And how would you succeed where many past governors have failed?
I believe I have the proper balance for this job because I was raised in Coos County. I live in Lane County. That represents the 2 types of Oregon that we have. And I believe that most people in Oregon realize they are paying more in individual taxes now, but receiving less in investment into their communities, into their schools. And I believe that's the fundamental flaw. We haven't had a governor to go out and say, tell it like it is. Major corporations aren't paying their fair share. We've got to get them to do it. I think it's in their interest to do it. I think it's in their interest to do it. And I believe that I would not go out as Senator Westland's talking about a sales tax, or Mr. Saxton and Mr. Mannix are talking about nothing, and the governor's avoiding even coming to talk about nothing. It seems to me that we need a leader that's willing to say, this is where we're going to take the state, and we're going to be able to put together the necessary votes to get it through and make that investment. People want that done.
I'm sorry, but I think they want to know more about which piece? How specifically would you restructure the tax system?
Well, you would have to make an amendment to the Oregon tax code, starting in the House of Representatives, passed by the House, passed by the Senate, signed by the governor, to raise the amount of money that major corporations pay. You'd have to have a bill to do that. It'd have to be approved, and the governor would have to sign it. I'm familiar with that process. I think it's a good one, and I would be willing to fight for making the necessary investment by driving up the contribution from 5 to something higher to make that investment.
Thank you. Mr. Hill?
Let me be candid. I don't think that in the near future that there's going to be any tax reform. Not until people feel that the funds that they're spending now are actually being spent wisely. I think the very best thing that we can do is a rainy day fund right now. That does give some stability, and it is something that is very simple and straightforward, and I think it's something that people understand. but we've had the sales tax go up. It's been up 9 times, and it's lost worse every time, so that's off the table.
Okay, thank you. Next question, Mr. Hill. Hope we have this correct. Why do you support public ownership of Portland General Electric rather than private control through stock ownership?
Well, it's not that I suppose private ownership through stock, private ownership through stocks. But what it is that it comes once in a lifetime, once in several lifetimes, for us to grab hold of our energy destiny here. And if you can get hold of your energy destiny, we can prosper here in this state. We can stop being perennially above the having one of the highest unemployment rates, high above the nation. If you can grab hold, if you can get hold of your energy destiny, you can save businesses. You can save people in their heating bills. Portland General Electric just now requested an 8.9% increase in rates. And then guess where? It's going to the stockholders instead of saving Oregon money. I believe in public-private partnerships. I'm not saying that the company isn't run well. What I'm saying is it needs to be run for the benefit of the people of Oregon if we have that opportunity. When you have an organization like TPG comes in, the smart money comes in, we better be smart and look at buying it too.
Thank you. Mr. Sorenson?
Just to be clear, the governor vetoed legislation passed by the Legislative Assembly that would have allowed the possibility of public purchase of Portland General Electric from Enron Corporation in their bankruptcy proceeding. The governor, the cost to Oregon ratepayers is estimated to be $100 million per year in perpetuity. So it was one of the most significant economic decisions the governor has made, and he did it, I think, out of trying to help PGE's executives, not the people of Oregon.
Thank you. Now we're going to go to questions from the floor. One benefit of belonging to the City Club is that members have the privilege of asking questions of the speakers. If people who are interested in asking questions would line up behind one of the microphones, which I believe there are 2. So I think we have about 10 minutes to do this, and I think the person should identify themselves as a member of the City Club and ask their question in 30 seconds or less, and then you should tell us to whom you are directing the question. We'll give you 60 seconds to respond, and then the other person 30 seconds to rebut. So turning to my left first, this gentleman may go first.
I'm Andy Linehan, a City Club member. I've heard quite a lot of campaigning today against someone who's not in the room with us, but I've heard very little campaigning against each other. So I'd like you each to give us a brief snapshot of how you see yourselves as different and what you offer that's different from your opponent who's here in the room.
Each take 60 seconds to answer that, please. Mr. Hill, would you like to start?
Thank you. Pete has run a courageous campaign. But one of the things that I know from my own experience is that it's really quite a leap from the legislature or from local government up to statewide office. I've been elected statewide twice, and as I mentioned, I'm the only candidate in this race other than the governor himself who has done that. And while Pete has run truly a courageous grassroots campaign, I think as he has mentioned, I haven't seen where it has gained the traction that would lead to actual electability. And so what I would say is that those are the things that distinguish me from my worth.
Thank you. Mr. Sorenson?
Well, I'm the only candidate in the race that's worked in Washington, D.C. for the Carter administration. I'm the only candidate that's worked in Congress. Half of Oregon is owned by the federal government. I think it's important that we have a candidate for governor who's got some relationship with something as significant as the state's relationship to the federal government. Secondly, I think it's really important that I'm the person in this race that's graduated not only from an Oregon high school, but a community college and a state university. I've had 2 children raised in the Eugene public school system. I think it's really important that we have a governor that has the outreach. As for electability, last year, the Riley poll showed me, I think it was November, showed me 10 points ahead of both Ron Saxton and Kevin Mannix, the leading Republican nominees. And I'll tell you what, it feels really good that I've been able to push the envelope that far, and I feel like we're just going to be closing in on winning this election with 180,000 votes in the Democratic primary.
Thank you. To my right?
I'm Roberta Palmer, City Club member. To Mr. Hill, I wonder if you agree with former Governor Kitzhaber that since the federal government has failed so miserably to deliver health care to Americans and to control costs, that it's time for all those federal funds, including Medicare, Medicaid, the employers' deductions for health care benefits, should all be turned over to the states for administration. Is that something you would push for down the road?
Well, that would obviously be quite a change. I like the idea because when you have to give Governor Kitzhaber great credit for the Oregon Health Plan. But we also have to be sure that if we're going to replace things, that they are actually better than what is in place now from the federal government. So I think that we should have a more streamlined waiver process. I do believe that the creativity does come up from the states, but to say it on just a complete wholesale basis, I guess I would resist that. But I do think that there should be a process to see that if, in fact, if we can spend the dollars better and get the results, then I think that the states should be allowed to do it. We understand what our problems are here on the ground. We've certainly demonstrated that in Oregon, but I have to say I'm not sure that other states have demonstrated that for their citizens.
Mr. Sorenson, would you like an opportunity?
Well, first of all, I'd like to see greater investment in the Oregon Health Plan out of Oregon's general fund, so we don't have to throw 70,000 people off the health plan. Secondly, I think that we need to be aggressive about looking at how other states have dealt with this. The governor just appointed a committee that's going to look into this and report back in 5 years. That's not leadership at all. The state of Montana last year in 5 months passed a health care bill in their legislature to cover 1/2 of the cost of all health insurance of small businesses in the state of Montana. It was good for the people, and it was good for the small business economy of that state. We have the exact same problem in our state. That's the direction I'd like to move in. If it looks like we could get some savings from putting all this money together, yeah, I'd like to do that. But I'd like to make sure we provide the health care up front first before we start throwing people off of Medicaid and Medicare.
Thank you. Is that Jody?
Jody Weiser, City Club member. Two-part question. Each year we collect about $5 billion in income taxes, but there's another $5 billion that we really don't ever examine that's spent in tax expenditures, and there's $1 billion that's not collected because individuals and corporations cheat. What would you do to address looking at those sources of funds?
Mr. Sorenson, would you like to go first? 60 seconds, please.
I think it's crucial that the state of Oregon invest the appropriate dollars in collecting the taxes. Some people say there's a 10-to-1 return. Some people say there's a 5-to-1 return on that investment of going out and trying to collect the taxes. It's a huge return on investment no matter which way you do it. I think it's crucial that the governor put in the budget the amount of money needed to go out and properly audit and collect the taxes. I think it's shameful we don't collect taxes from people that do owe those taxes. And you all know, of course, that PGE did not pay any taxes for several years. I think it's really crucial that the government do its duty. And by the way, if there's a 10-to-1 or 5-to-1 return, that's more money that can go into Oregon classrooms.
Mr. Hill.
Well, fair collection of taxes is part of the whole element of a fair tax system. If people become more cynical that people who should be paying taxes are not paying taxes, then they become reluctant to pay their taxes. And even if it's justified, they become reluctant to be willing to pay for things like schools, the things that are essential. And so, yes, there should be strict enforcement and strict collection, because if some are not paying taxes, others are going to pick up that burden. And what I would also say is that it should be aggressive. And also, when you look at the corporate, at the kicker, when they see taxes that are going to when they see their tax monies that are going to out-of-state corporations, that also breaks down the confidence that people have in the system. The system must be fair, or people will stop respecting it, and we'll be where we are now.
Okay, we have time for one more question, and Gil Johnson to my left.
Thank you. Gil Johnson, City Club member. The Oregon Supreme Court recently ruled that Measure 37 was indeed constitutional. They also ruled that nude pole dancing is free speech. But anyway, I would like to if you are elected governor, how would you work with the legislature to address some of the problems that are pretty obvious under Measure 37?
Mr. Sorenson. Sorry.
Thank you very much. I was a practicing attorney for 15 years and still am licensed to practice law in Oregon. I'm authorized to practice before the U.S. Supreme Court and the Oregon Supreme Court, and I taught law at the University of Oregon Law School, so I'm quite interested in this. I took out a full page in the Oregon Voters Pamphlet opposing Measure 37. I think some of the things I said have come to pass. I think it is an attack on Oregon's land use system. I think what we need to do is take a look at the Big Look Commission, which is meeting now to review Oregon's land use laws and look at the implications of the passage of Measure 37. One of the things I'm particularly concerned about is the Kelo decision, which is a U.S. Supreme Court case that says that local governments can take private property and then turn around and sell it to developers. And I think that is an aspect of protecting property rights in Oregon that we need to address, and we need to make sure our laws don't allow what happened to the Kelo family in Connecticut.
Mr. Hill.
This is going to be one of the thorniest issues to face the next governor, because we have to respect the decision, but what it really does amount to, working under the assumptions that local governments do not have the funds to pay off these decisions for the landowners, what we will have is a de facto abolishment of land use planning. That cannot be allowed to happen. The quality of life that we enjoy here has to do with the fact that we don't have sprawl, that we've preserved our forest land, that we've preserved our farmland, some of the best in the world. And what is going to happen is that the governor is going to have to find some way, either you frankly come up with the funds to be able to pay these landowners, or try to do something to make a change in the law so that it still complies with the Oregon Supreme Court decision.
Thank you. We'll now move to the final portion of the program, 3-minute closing statements from each candidate, and we'll begin with Jim Hill.
Thank you. A governor must have a vision of excellence for his or her state. And a governor must be able to convey that vision to its citizens so that they can have it in their hearts and minds. When I moved here in 1974, Tom McCall was governor. And where there was pollution in our rivers, where there was garbage in our rivers, he saw pristine waters. Where there was litter and filth on the side of our roads, he saw cleanliness with the bottle bill. We have to have that same vision of excellence for our schools, for the health of our citizens, and their ability to make a decent living. We are running out of time to address these issues. I mentioned earlier that I wanted to be the best governor that this state had ever had. To try to explain this, I'd like for you to imagine, I'm sure that there are people in this room who were the first in their families to go to college. And I'd like for you to imagine that when you went to college, what you did was you worked harder because you knew about the sacrifices that others had made for you. When I was elected state treasurer, I became the first person of color to be elected in this state, statewide. And guess what? I had to succeed. A burning desire to be the best. That's really what it takes. That's what any governor should have. If I'm governor, do you think that I would waste 4 years of my time and wait until the last year? And by the way, I was an excellent state treasurer. Yes, shameless bragging. Yes, I was excellent at it. But that's the kind of passion that it takes. And that's the kind of passion that it is going to take for us to solve this problem, the problems that we have in this state. If you've ever seen immigrants who come into this country who have been sworn in as American citizens, you know what? I think they appreciate what they have more than we can ever understand. And that is the way that it is for me. We don't get chances for these kind of jobs. And when we get them, you know what? We want to be the best. And that's what I'll be as your next governor.
Thank you. Mr. Sorenson.
Today I talked about 3 words: respect, investment, and action. And those words convey much of what it's like for me to be up here and talk to you. I really appreciate the fact that you put this event on. I appreciate Mr. Hill's remarks today. I'm disappointed, of course, the governor didn't come. But you know what? I think I got my start in politics because my grandfather's dairy farm, I got to drive the manure spreader. And I think that, that it's important that we realize just how hard a lot of people work in this society and how it's important for us to invest in them and respect them the way they have respected us, the way they have invested in us. And I'm a third generation American. And I believe that we have tremendous opportunity and freedom and just to have a wonderful situation. But, you know, just quite frankly, too many people are hurting. Working people are hurting. Poor people are hurting. We don't have leadership from this governor to talk about the way life really is because this governor is too isolated. And I think it's important that we realize that Oregon is a Democratic state. 4 of our 5 U.S. representatives for the last 20 years representing 80% of the population of Oregon are Democrat. All of the statewide elected officials in Oregon but 1 are Democrats. We voted the last 5 straight presidential elections for the Democratic nominee, and that included Michael Dukakis, one of 10 states to vote for Dukakis. So I think what you're going to do in the May 16 election is you're going to pick the next governor of this state. And I'm in this race to win. I'll tell you what, there's 3.5 million people in Oregon, 1.8 million registered voters, 700,000 Democrats, and because of the lackluster performance of this governor, about half or fewer than half are even going to vote. So the 350,000 of us are going to vote. And you know what? I've been traveling this state for 15 months, working my heart out and getting our volunteers to work hard, and I'll tell you what, we are going to get 180,000 Democrats in this state of Oregon, to elect a real Democrat for a change. Thank you.
That concludes today's forum. Thank you both very much.
Thanks, Doug.
I want to thank our candidates for an enlightening debate. Special thanks to our moderator, Liz Kaufman, our timekeeper, Chris Smith, and our panelists. And thanks to all of you for being here, and we're adjourned.
Thank you.